welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessikah with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and I am here today with
Tara Sim.
And we are here to talk about City of Dusk, which was one of those books that I judge books by covers. Sorry, I know you're not supposed to. I don't judge people by the covers because that's what the metaphor is for, you know, don't judge a book by its cover. But like covers of books are beautiful and will often drag me in. So I saw the cover of your book first, and then I saw that it was called City of Dusk, and I was like, ooh, that sounds nice. And then I started reading the description, and I was like, yeah, this is one I'm going to absolutely need to read. And it was really great, and I am just so excited to talk to you about it. So first off, please talk a little bit about the inspiration behind this book, and we can kind of go through the characters and everything else thus forth.
Yeah, so The City of Dusk is my debut epic adult fantasy book coming out with Orbit next week. There's so much that like went into this book that it's kind of like hard for me to like pinpoint the very beginning. But the initial spark of this story came to me when I was in college, which was a long time ago. And back then it was more of like one of those little like blips of an idea that you just kind of write down and then forget about for a while. And so I had this idea that like there were multiple families that were descended from the same royal lineage, basically, but they were all technically, bastards. They didn't actually have claims to the throne. And then, of course, when this story takes place, the king does not have an heir. So one of the houses is probably going to be, in contention for becoming that heir. And at that point, I didn't have a title for the story. I just actually called it by the last name of one of the main characters, which is Lestrider. And so it just became the Lestrider project for, like 10 years or so. And over time, it just kind of eventually grew and grew. Like I remember like years ago, I actually wrote out a little like family tree sort of thing for like the different families. And I was like, okay, now I got to name the parents and now I got to name the siblings. Like it's just a lot. So it was very much a labor of love for like a decade. And in that time, there were all of these, influences that kind of went into it from like things that were very, I think like foundational for me. Like, for example, Fullmetal Alchemist is one of those stories that just kind of like stuck to me as like very formative in how I tell stories.
Yes, that's an unforgettable story. We're going to start talking anime, everybody. So if you're in it, let's just go in that direction when it prompts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, huge. I've been like a huge anime nerd since I was like at least 13, 14. So it's been part of my life for a while. And honestly, you can't get much better than Fullmetal Alchemist. Like it's one of the greatest pieces of storytelling I have ever encountered. It's so good. So very formative for, baby Tara and beyond. So pieces like that kind of like go into my writing pretty naturally. But then there's also stuff like, I don't know, like different books that I read, like A Darker Shade of Magic or like Gideon the Ninth and stuff like that. Kind of like, if there's like something in it that like really like speaks to me, like aesthetically or like storytelling wise, I find that I kind of integrate it into my own style. And then also just really random pieces kind of inspired certain things in the world building, like Hereditary randomly. Like, so there's like little bits of like horror and stuff throughout the series. Like a lot went into it.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. I loved your characters. They were so messy. And it is, I have to make it clear. So this is not YA, but it is good for crossover, and it's good because, you know, like the ages that the main characters are, you're not technically a teenager, but you're supposed to be really becoming an adult, and that's kind of difficult. And what I liked about all of these characters were that they were, in a way, they were all sheltered because they were part of these big houses. There were the four houses. So there's the elementalists, which is Mardova. There was the last riders, the Vakara. There were the necromancers, and they were just all really cool. And it was funny because they were just, like I said, like messy, like Angelica, who was Marjo. Oh my God. I feel like I have written down next to her name, kind of a mess. Like she's from this that's focused on ambition, and she's just so like laser focused on what she's supposed to be doing, but the rest of her just can't really get out of her own way because everybody's got their thing.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely went into this book knowing it was going to be crossover, because like you said, like I felt like I had to like go this route. Also, my cat is here. If you hear random
What's
meowing.
Your cat's name? We've had roosters on the show before. We've had
roosters.
Cats.
Oh well, I'm not not as exciting as a rooster, but this cat's name is Becca, and my other one is named Ray, but I don't think she will be making an appearance.
That's okay.
Becca does not like it when I talk for some reason, like to other people. So she's like, "Who are you talking to, Mom? Why aren't you talking to me?"
We like cats here. So listeners, if you hear a cat, it is just Becca.
It's just Becca.
Yeah, it's just Becca.
Actually, I think she just left. So Becca's gone. She came, she left, she did her business, you know? Yeah, so I very much intentionally wanted it to be crossover because the main characters are the heirs of these noble families. And so, like you said, they grew up in this kind of like sheltered environment where they weren't like, they're aware of the world that they live in, but through the process of the story and the plot unraveling, they learn a lot more about it and how messed up it actually is, and like trying to figure out what they can do about it. So like kind of in that sense, like there is kind of almost like an upper YA like feel to it, but at the same time, these are characters who are in their 20s and they have already largely discovered who they are, but you know, like you said, they're very messy and very flawed, and trying to like, I don't know, like put that against like what they're finding out about the world and like how they can use their specific powers to help that dying world is like, I think very much an adult theme, at least for me. Like I wanted them all to be millennials, basically being like, what can we do?
Well, you know, there's this quote from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and she's older at this point. This is like her post-teen years, where she like likens herself to cookie dough and says she's not done baking. And I feel like that's, I mean, I don't know if we're ever really done baking. Maybe that's good. We shouldn't ever really be done baking, because once you get set in your ways, then, you know, it's like you're not willing to learn anymore. But I think that there's something to be said about the age of these characters, that's a good thing. Like you shouldn't be, you know, all of a sudden like early 20s and you know everything about everything and you're automatically okay with everything that's happening. You know, you're really coming into your power at that time, as they are literally.
Right, exactly.
And it's a good time to tell the story. Just like, you know, teenagehood is a really, and YA in general has blossomed because people have realized like these teenagers really need stories about what they're feling right now. Same thing, I think, at different stages of your life. You know, you have like these characters like Risha, who's a necromancer, and I absolutely loved her. I have to say, she's one of my favorites. But yeah, but like, you know, again, it's like necromancy comes into so many different stories, like you mentioned Gideon the Ninth, but I like that there's like so many more like dimensions to it, and like you're writing then like, okay, well, this character's just going to raise the dead because evil and dead raising. It's not like that. And I loved that. And then when you have like the shadow, I guess, shadow workers, like that magic system is really cool too. And without giving too much away, I just want to ask, like, how difficult was it to keep the different magic systems in check? Like, did you have, and the characters, because this is told from the point of view of, I believe, like 7 characters.
Yeah.
Like revolves. So like, did you have like a big, I don't want to call it a murder board, but kind of like something where where you were connecting how everything came together and what went with what?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I had many like Pepe Sylvia moments where I was just like at the board and like, and I have like a few friends who I routinely go to for like brainstorming and stuff. And so I would routinely, Pepe Sylvia them, where I was just like, and then this thing, and then this thing. And they're like, oh, okay. Cause like you said, there's 7 POVs, although I would say there are 4 main POVs, a 5th semi-regular POV, and then the 6th and 7th are very loose.
They're I guess threads. They were threads, and it was almost like that. I feel like I use this so much here, but like almost like that Rashomon, like or even like what is it, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern type thing, where it's like, okay, well, here's the people who are billed as the heroes, but here's what's going on with the people surrounding and supporting them, because they're also important.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's like my semi-regular POV, Julian, that he was there because he was not a noble. And so I wanted a like commoner's, perspective of this city and, how he deals with these things. And then the 2 other POVs are more like, they just pop up occasionally, like here and there. They're not like super, big POVs. And I feel like the process of revising this book was very difficult, just because there were so many moving parts, so many characters, so many magic systems and stuff like that. And so it took a while to, get them all threaded the way that they were supposed to be. It's kind of like, I had to get the book wrong many times before I got it right, or hopefully right. Especially when it comes to like I want it to be character driven most of all. Like there's a big plot, there's, a lot of world building, but my main concern when I write books is characters, because as a reader, that's what I want. I want characters who I'm going to love. Like you can have the greatest premise in the world, you can have the greatest prose in the world, but like if you don't have characters that I like, then sorry, I'm not gonna like the book. So, character for me came first and foremost, making sure that their arcs were very, sturdy, well-rounded, that they were very, messy and had flaws, but they had redeeming qualities as well. So that, came to me first and foremost. One of the things that I struggled with actually with one of the POVs, which is Dante, I actually had to figure out how to best put him into the book, because in my first drafts, he just kind of popped up, I think, once in a while from the specific location that he is in. I can't say without spoiling.
Right. Yeah, no, I was going to say, maybe we can not specifically, we can't specifically speak about that, but we can hint at it.
Yeah. So it ended up changing so that the majority of his POV is actually in Act 1. And then you don't really see him again for a little bit, rather than having it be, spread out throughout the book. So stuff like that, where I just kind of had to rearrange things, depending on how they would best work out. And then of course with the magic systems, I feel like I was actually pretty good at handling the different magic systems, making sure they didn't really like cross over too much. Making sure they were very distinct. Like what you said about necromancy. I love necromancy a lot. It shows up, in quite a bit of my writing. But I wanted this one to be, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people associate necromancy with like evil and like bad things. And like, I'm like, no, it's just, what if it's not? What if it's not evil?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So the family that has this power, you know, they're very good people. Like they're duty bound. They like, you know, obeying the law and stuff like that. But they're there because there's, you know, this ongoing problem in their realm where the dead keep rising up because they cannot get to the realm of death anymore. Everything's all sealed up. So you need these necromancers to help like try to keep the peace, you know, keep the dead in the necropolis where they're supposed to stay, you know, help people with the, you know, their lost loved ones and stuff like that. So really digging into like making the magic system specific was pretty fun. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like there are definitely problems when you try to tackle, you know, an ambitious project like this, but I think, you know, eventually I got it to work.
Yeah, I think so too. I just loved the whole, I mean, I'm a fan of any story that has like multiple deities sort of playing within or without the scale of the world. And I really liked this. I liked that I also liked how fluid just everybody's, you know, like, I guess orientation was. It was really refreshing, you know. I mean, Jessikah has a mom and a stepmom, and like it was just like this is what it is, you know. There was no like real preface to it. It was like, this is Jessikah's stepmom. Her dad passed away.
Yeah.
These are her stepsisters. It was just really like not so much like, hey, let's make this a topic. Let's just, this is just who the story is. This is just where the characters come from. And it was like with a bunch of the characters too. It was a real, just good, refreshing way of telling a story and showing character relationships.
Yeah, I really don't like making worlds where there is homophobia, racism, stuff like that. Like obviously in like such like a big secondary fantasy world, you are going to get some sort of prejudice in there, but I want to make as safe a space as possible for my readers, which means, you know, limiting the kind of stuff that you would normally find in these big epic fantasy stories. And one of those things is homophobia. So in this world, it's very, you know, queer normative. You know, like you said, the thing with Jessikah's having a stepmom and, you know, no one bats an eye at it. I think there's a line in there at some point where Dante's mother is like, oh, you're having wine with this like other noble boy. We should probably set up, you know, marriage things for you soon. And he's like, no, thanks. You know, just stuff like that, just making it all very normal and casual, because I think the more we see of that in science fiction and fantasy in general, like, or just like any genre books, like the more, you know, normal it's just going to be, and the more people won't bat an eye at it in real life, hopefully. Like that's the goal, I guess.
So we kind of touched a little bit about how Fullmetal Alchemist was a formative inspiration. So what else do you like? Because I could talk about that forever. What else either inspired you without maybe even realizing it, or with a little bit?
Oh man, I feel like there's so much. When I was like really young, one of the first like fantasy books I ever read was Alana, the First Adventure by Tamara Pierce. And I grew up loving those books and being like, yeah, girls with swords and they can fight and it's awesome. And so I think that was my first big like spark into writing fantasy and like, you know, just being obsessed with fantasy in general. And when I was a teen, I didn't really have like the wide range of YA that we have today, unfortunately. So I kind of just read adult fantasy books. And so things like Lord of the Rings and The Wheel of Time were pretty formative for me in terms of like, look at these like massive worlds that I could create too. And like these big casts of characters and stuff like that. And of course there's anime. So I think another one that was very formative for me was actually Inuyasha.
Oh, Inuyasha. Yeah. That so I must ask,
Mhm.
and I did warn listeners that we're going to go full anime at one point.
Yes.
So what I will 100% say, when I graduated college, I graduated in the early 2000s.
Mhm.
And I was an anime fan when I was a kid, but that was really difficult when you were an anime fan in the early 90s, mid 90s, because the access that you had to it was not great. I was able to
Mhm.
watch the DIC Sailor Moon really, really early in the morning when I was like 12,
Mhm.
and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But, later found out it was poorly dubbed. There was so much more going on that
Mhm.
I didn't even realize some characters' genders were changed.
Mhm.
And I'm not even talking about the ones that were, well, their genders weren't changed. Their relationship, they said that they were cousins, and they were not
Right.
cousins. They
Yeah.
were not, yeah, they were girlfriends. But you have like these two villains, and one thing that anime does really well is, I mean, there are villains that are just straight out villains and they're terrible, but there are also villains that have these gray areas, and these two characters were in a relationship, and they, even though I believe he was more feminized in the way that he was drawn, in the Japanese version 100% the character was male, who enjoyed painting his nails. And I think like when I got older and I got some more information about the source material, I was sort of blown away by that. But the other side to that was, like I said, like there wasn't a lot of access. So if I wanted to find anime, I had to go to a comic book shop and go all the way
Mhm.
to the back where these dust covered VHS cassettes were. And you would hope that what you were renting was not like hentai or anything,
Yeah.
because you never really knew. So I'm always jealous of people who were like, yeah, I grew up with Inuyasha and Fullmetal Alchemist.
I think I was in the era of Adult Swim. And so that's how I largely consumed my anime as a teen, because it would come on like late at night. Actually, what I would do, and I'm going to date myself here, is that I had a TV in my room that had a VHS player like built into it. And so what I would do is I had a blank VHS and I would record Inuyasha and whatever else came on while I was sleeping. And then in the morning before school, I would watch the episode from last night while eating breakfast, and then I would go to school. And that's how I started many days of my teen. And that's how I largely consumed anime back in the day. But then there was still an access problem. So like a lot of times I would have to either go to like really sketchy websites, or when YouTube got really big, they would have like the, part 1, part 2, part 3 videos on YouTube, and you have
Very
to go
frustrating.
fishing
Yes.
for the right one. Yeah.
Yeah, because the other alternative, like if you, other than Adult Swim, if you wanted to access anime legally, was you would have to go to a video store that sold it at like 2 episodes for $40 or something like that. Yeah, very, very, very difficult. But I was very grateful when the world really got opened up, and like I would get to see things like Revolutionary Girl Utena,
Oh yeah.
which you like girls with swords.
Mhm.
That show was what that, like, I still am kind of like in awe of what actually happened in that show, and what, like, how that came together. It's
Mhm.
bizarre, but in the best way. But yeah, what I love about so much of it is a lot of the stories were written by women,
Mhm.
and had these characters that just explored like their feelings and all of these really different magic
Mhm.
systems. And what I love about City of Dusk, and like so many books I think that are coming out now is that, a lot of people who were inspired by that, and a lot of, like female, non-binary, authors are really harnessing that feeling and bringing it into, I guess, their own space. And I love it.
Yeah, I definitely think that like there's so much more adult sci-fi fantasy, like written by women that I don't know, it's just like completely like redoes the space. it like what I wanted from, a teenager when I was first writing, epic fantasy stories and like getting into all of that. I wanted more women on these shelves, and that's what's happening. And they're completely like changing the game and like showing just how amazingly talented they are. And once they're given a chance, and I absolutely love it, and I consider it an honor to be among them. And especially like all these people, like I know a lot of us were inspired by stuff like anime or like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and like all this stuff that we grew up with, and like seeing it kind of develop into these really like complex, awesome stories is just, it's very fulfilling.
So speaking of fulfilling, what is next for these characters?
Ooh, a lot of angst. There's quite a lot of angst in book 2. I turned in a draft of it last month, I believe. So we'll see if my editor likes it, first and foremost. But I think there's just a lot more. There's just a lot more of like everything in book 2. I had a lot of fun developing these character arcs more, showing off a whole lot more of the world, which was so much fun. And like I don't want to like be too spoilery, but book 1 kind of ends a little bit on like a cliffhanger, and so getting to see how these characters like get out of this situation, I think is going to be first and foremost on people's minds when they read the book. Yeah, and then other than that, I'm actually also revising my next young adult, which comes out next year. So I have a lot on my plate, I guess.
Do you have trouble like separating the two when you're writing together? Do you have like a method of being like, okay, so today I'm going to have to get into a YA headspace. Today, I'm going to focus on the City of Dusk characters, and or do you ever have like a moment where you feel like the two are starting to get a little mixed up and you need to step back from it?
So I try to separate them out as best I can. So I tend to just like focus on one before focusing on the other. So I tend to not like split my days up. So like I first and foremost like focused on getting the draft of book 2 done, and before I focused on the young adult, and that way it kind of helps my mind shift more. It's actually kind of funny because like as I'm revising the young adult this month, there were like a couple of spots where I could see myself like slipping more into like the adult voice, or like the characters were having more of an adult voice, or like they were swearing more than they should be, and I was like, nope, rein that in. Can't have that.
Yeah, I'm impressed because sometimes I can't even separate what I'm having for lunch versus what I'm having for dinner.
Yeah.
So that's really amazing. I'm very much looking forward to the next one. Readers, you are in for a treat. Pick up City of Dusk at libraries, independent bookstores, wherever you access your books. This is a really good one. And anything you want to leave us with before we sign off?
Ooh, please buy the book. I put a lot of effort into it, and I'm very proud of it. And the fact that it's about to be released soon, after like a decade of working on it, is absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm already like thrilled with how many people have read it and loved it. So I hope it goes out to more readers and they love it too.
Thank you so much. This was Jessikah with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest today was
Tara Sim.
And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.